So I've been meaning to make a lot of videos lately, but it doesn't seem like the time to put out the type of videos that I've been recording, like my end of the year and that sort of thing, because there's so much other stuff going on. So I've felt very limited on platforms like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter lately, because your character numbers are limited, or it's not a platform that you can just kind of like really have a wide ranging conversation about anything at length. So instead of just making a post, I thought I would reach out to some friends. And so I reached out to Naomi from Read Like a Rockstar, to Megan Forbes from Too Cool for Middle School, my friend Shivy from Call Me Shivy, Dustin Ecker, who goes by Dustin Ecker on social. That's his real name also, but it's anyway. And my friend LaTawnya from Smarty Style. And I asked them if they would do a Zoom call with me. I asked them to speak on a topic that they thought was important, that could be something around the topic of race that's not being talked about in education. And so what follows is our hour-long conversation that we had about that. At one point in the video, you'll see Naomi had to leave because her baby woke up and she had to go tend to them. And then Megan had to leave at one point also because she had a Zoom call. I'm not gonna edit this. I'm gonna play you the whole thing because I don't want my edits getting in the way of what was said here. There is some PG-13 language in here. I typically don't curse on my channel, even though I curse a lot in real life, but on my channel I don't, and it's a choice that I've made, but it comes up, and it was from a place of passion and a place of honesty that I think. So I chose to leave that in here as well. So here's my conversation with all of these excellent educators. So, are we good? Ready? Awesome. So how I thought we might start this is if really quickly, so folks have a sense of like who everyone is. Could you just, a real quick bio, it could just be like, where do you teach? Who are you? What grade? What location are you coming from? To just give folks a sense of like who we are in any given order. So Shivy, you're to my left, so I'll jump over to my left, take top down.
Yeah, so my name is Alfred Shivy Brooks. Shivy, before teaching or any other thing that I did, I was in the entertainment industry for a while, and rap and made music and toured and things like that. But transitioned into education. I'm a high school teacher here in Georgia, which is I live in East Atlanta. Riverdale is like just south of Atlanta. It's like where our airport is. I work, I work in a predominantly Black and brown community here that has a lot of needs. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the gist.
All right. I am Naomi O'Brien. I've been a teacher for 10 years. I'm usually in kindergarten through second grade. My last few years have been in kinder and first grade though. I'm currently off maternity leave, but like Shivy, all the schools that I've worked at are predominantly Black and brown, high needs, and I'm happy to be there serving my community.
That's right.
My name is LaTawnya Robinson. I teach now 8th grade social studies, language arts. This is I just finished my 15th year teaching. Prior to that, I spent the other 14 years teaching elementary school. So I've taught kinder, I've taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The district I work in is very middle class, very racially mixed, but very conservative at the same time. So I'm one of few, like a small population of teachers of color in the district. And I purposely came to teaching because I grew up in this area, but was made to feel like academic achievement was not the norm for people that looked like me. So I wanted to use a few teachers that look like students of color that was actually achieving to show them that this is something that is for us.
Oh, you're muted, Megan.
Man.
Zoom light, got it.
My name is Megan Forbes. I teach 6th grade history and 8th grade English in like a suburb of LA. And so we're in an area that just has people from all over the world. And then my school in particular, the majority of the population, their parents and grandparents are from China and Taiwan and Hong Kong.
My name is Dustin Ecker. I'm a fourth grade teacher in Indianapolis, Indiana. I've taught 3 years in Louisville, Kentucky, and then 7 years here in Indianapolis. I teach in a school in which the majority of the staff is white. However, it doesn't reflect the student body. And so, and that's both buildings that I've worked at in my career have been like that.
And I'm CJ Reynolds. I teach ninth grade literature in West Philadelphia at an all-boys school. There we're all-boys charter school. And my students are predominantly African-American, although I taught in Camden, New Jersey also, and that was more of a mixed school. It was like Black and brown students there still predominantly though as well. And this is I just finished my 15th year as well, which is wild because I felt like in my first year, by the 15th year, I'd have it down. And now I'm slowly learning that there's still a lot to learn. So, part of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation today was one, because tweets seem so limited. Instagram seems like it only kind of goes so far. And I liked this idea of sort of like a long range conversation where folks could really flesh out in more than 280 characters what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they think is important for folks to know. And so the prompt that I sort of sent to you all, and this can go wherever it goes. I have no set sort of agenda for this, but I wanted to create a space where people that I knew, at least online, could share some of those thoughts. And I've seen all of you speak to this on some level on either your channel or Instagram or Twitter or wherever. And the prompt was, what do you think folks need to know, or what's not being talked about in the space of education, at least, with regards to race? That could be at the moment, it could be at large, but I'm just wondering sort of what do you think is not getting a voice at this moment? And so that it was that limited, but it could go as far or as wide reaching as you would like it to. And I'm just gonna drop that out there, and whoever wants to pick it up first can, and then just run with it.
I can go first. For me personally, and much like Dustin, I was saying that I teach in a Black and brown community, but I'm always the only Black teacher at my schools. And I honestly think there's not enough talk and focus on the anti-racist training that teachers need to be working in these communities. And even if they're in an all-white community as well, like that training is just very needed. Over my 10 years in education, just some of the things and practices and actions and words that I've seen white teachers do to students of color, and even in front of their white children, is just wildly unacceptable, and that needs to be a focus for sure.
What in your opinion, and I don't mean to be like the orator here, but like I'm just really interested, what would that look like? So if someone hears that and they go, okay, I want to shift things in my school, is there like an example you could give, or was there a training or a book or a resource that you know of that would help folks to sort of start unpacking some of that stuff?
I mean, I can't think of anyone right now, but I think that looks like a school-wide commitment from the top down, PDs that are happening more than once. Like I think in my 10 years, there's probably been 3 times where I've attended a district-wide PD that was 30 minutes one time during the school year. Nobody took it seriously, and that was that. I think it would need a school-wide commitment, full buy-in from, admin, all of the teachers, and it needs to be ongoing for sure.
I think it's just kind of what she's saying. It's just not commonplace. Like it's not commonplace like other training. So I just thought this morning, as soon as distance learning started, there were so many posts, so many resources, so many ideas, so many thoughts shared by the PD department in my district. And there is yet to be one post about how to address what's going on now with students, how to bring this up in the classroom, because it's just not something that is viewed as a part of curriculum. I know for me, even though the area I'm in is by site diverse, the teaching staff is not diverse. And for me, that would look like me not having to tell teachers or point out to teachers the assumptions they're making when they're teaching their students of color that are inhibiting their students of color. So there's been a couple of teachers where I've had to say that have said something like, well, I'm not going to do that with my students because they can't do that. Because even though my district is middle class, there are schools that are in one part of the neighborhood that are like the poor schools, but they're really not. And then there's schools that are up the hill that are just like seen as high functioning. And so we'll go to those high functioning schools and be like, wow, look at what that teacher's doing in that class. But then we'll come back to our Title I school and they'll say, well, my kids can't do that. And so I know I've said to teachers, your kids can't do that because you're not allowing them to do that because you've assumed that they can't do that. And they know that you are making that assumption. Like, even if they don't verbalize it, they know it. And so I think just to go off what she's saying, that's what it would look like. That assumption would not be there. The district would have posted something about this by now on their district website. And it wouldn't be so isolated. We wouldn't be waiting for Black History Month or Asian Pacific Islander Month. It would just be integrated all the time.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Like on that end of things, it's just that, especially deficit-based thinking, like just constant deficit-based thinking models where teachers come at you with what students cannot do, limiting factors based on race, socioeconomic status, just anything along of the sort, especially in my district too. I will say that my school has taken steps in the past year or so, though we are predominantly white staff. They've taken steps to having courageous conversations that are ongoing and uncomfortable, and which is good. However, there's still a lot of resistance to that. And so looking out, like, how do we make that where it's commonplace, like you're saying, to the extent to where like staff doesn't feel like it's not needed? Because I feel like that's the vibe I get, is that because it's uncomfortable, it's not needed, when in reality, that's exactly why we need it.
Or I think even because they're unwilling to examine their practices, they assume it's not needed, and they say, well, I treat all of my kids the same, and of course I have high expectations. And you sit in the back of their classrooms. Like one year I was pushing into classrooms as the gifted teacher, and I got to be in different classrooms at the site that I'd been at for the past 6 years, and I couldn't believe some of the things that I was seeing. And I would pull the teachers aside and say, like, did you notice that, you know, like this white student talked back to you 5, 6, 7 times and you did nothing. And the one time that this Black kid said something, you kicked him out of the classroom immediately. And then when he was frustrated because he saw exactly what happened, this was a 5th grader, you then called the office and now he has a referral. Like this, and she was so embarrassed, of course, and she didn't mean to do it. And like, those are the things that they don't pay attention to, and think that they don't need those trainings. Like Dustin was saying, like, oh, we don't need this. Like, I love all of my students, but you have, you know, the biases and you have these things inside of you that do need to be addressed, and it needs to be ongoing. And adding on to what LaTawnya was saying, with not even just academics, but behavior as well. Like the amount of kids I see getting kicked out of class, suspended, referrals because the teacher is viewing it through a racist lens. And it's just really frustrating, and it's sad because like you're showing these kids that you don't care about their education. You're showing your white students how little you value the Black students, and it just needs to change.
You know, what's so important about that, real quick, is that I just think that it's that uncomfortability piece, right? It is willing to fail, willing to be vulnerable, and say, you know what? I've never thought of that. I've been doing that for years, and I just didn't even notice it. And being able to enter into that conversation or ask someone to go a little bit further with you or actually dialogue with you about that. But so often I feel like when these conversations come up, it turns to, yeah, she's always saying that. Every time I say something, she always has something that has to be about race. It's always about this. It's always pushing me on, because it's that piece where it hurts, right? Someone's holding a mirror up to what you're doing, your good intentions, and saying, no, your good intentions like aren't good enough, or you're not noticing that you're doing this thing wrong, instead of saying thank you. Like, thank you for bringing that up. Like, I really will keep that in mind, and can we have a bigger talk about that? And I think when we can get past that sort of that, us, and what I'm talking about here is white educators being so hurt by the opinions of others. It's like, no, bring that. But like, let's have a conversation about it, and really trying to move past your hurt and trying to just want everything to like, can it just be a nice day? Do we have to bring it to that? Can't we just have a nice, peaceful PD meeting, as if they were of any use anyway, most of the time? But it's like trying to just really have that conversation and dial into that, I think is so
But CJ, that's what white privilege allows for. And that is the underarching issue that we have in terms of why we're not realizing any real action towards identifying, addressing, and remedying the racial bias that exists all throughout education. When I was a special educator for a few years, and if let's say I'm giving a kid a Woodcock-Johnson test, and I'm testing their cognitive abilities, and I have to show this Black kid a picture of this white Greek, and I have to ask that child to describe what the garb is that person is wearing, when culturally that is not relevant to that child. So if they can't give the proper answer, now I'm nicking points off, which is going to help further identify that disproportionately identify our kids as requiring special ed services. And these things are intrinsic all the way up and through to when we're taking SATs or ACTs or GREs or any of these things, because our education is created, our curriculum are created and designed without people of color at the table. One of our biggest issues in education is the fact that the majority of our content is based off of what Texas decides. And Texas is not reflective of the entire country. So now we're creating these standards based on what some white guys in Texas decide should be for the entire country, because they have more students than everyone else. But to answer in terms of what PDs or trainings or things that we could be using, there needs to be a national intentionality behind culturally responsive pedagogy. Our white teachers have to be aware of their white privilege. They have to be aware of the things that they are doing or not doing that are continuing to perpetuate what we have. That white teacher not noticing that she reprimanded a Black student much more swiftly than she would the white student is a perfect example of just what white privilege is. You saw the young brother and sister out here in Atlanta, right around the corner from my house, get their windows smashed out. But there's another angle of that where there was, I swear to God, this is just like a perfect depiction of what America is. There's a white girl and a white boy in a car right in front of them. And the white girl's out the window, sees the news camera, she's, hey! Meanwhile, the Black kids are in the car right behind them, getting their windows smashed out, their tires slashed, getting tased, drug out of the car, right? And that is what our experiences are, especially, I'm in high school, man. My Black kids become adults in the eyes of America much more quickly than any other kids do. I had to tell my 13-year-old son yesterday, we coming back from, I was meeting with all the rally organizers in Atlanta yesterday. And I was telling him, I said, bruh, you need to understand that at this stage of your life, you are no longer seen as a child as you walk in the streets. These people will identify you as being a young adult already. Your innocence is gone. Your ability to just be tuned out in terms of what's going on in the world is gone. Like, understand, like there are risks towards your life as you walk, and you have to be aware of them. And we don't get to spectate and see what's going on in these streets right now from the side. And I mean, white privilege is us being able to honestly have conversations like this and not be in the streets. Because, we're slick kind of sitting up from a bird's eye perspective, kind of looking down at what's going on. But there's real stuff going on in the streets, real policies that need to be enacted, real transgressions that are happening to our communities throughout the country. And a lot of us are wasting time doing too much goddamn talking. Frankly.
Another thing that I'm seeing kind of on the flip side of the culturally responsive teaching is it seems like teachers are more than willing to run ourselves in circles to do something for Black History Month or do something for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We are willing to talk about other cultures, but we do not talk about the history of white people. I mean, I know that we say that our history books are from the perspective of rich white men, but we do an excellent job of erasing actual white people from all of the struggles in our history books. So when we look at the civil rights movement, who was Martin Luther King marching against? We have no idea. He's just marching out there in the streets, like just against buses. Like there are no people that we ever identify to show like who he's fighting against. We teach about slavery. I've seen plenty of teachers do, you know, all of these exercises where they want to like humanize enslaved people and like talk about their day and their cabins and all kinds of stuff. What about the enslaver? What about the person who's managing all of this? We don't ever learn about that kind of stuff. So it's impossible for people to draw a straight line from a slave owner to someone who passed Jim Crow legislation to police brutality today to us, to teachers. We can't see that. And we can do as much, like, I know that we have good intentions, and I definitely do this as well, but you know, we're trying to like instill like cultural pride in our students, and they can go to Harvard and become a bird watcher, and then go to Central Park, and a white lady's still gonna call the cops on them for telling her to put her dog on a leash. Like we've got to address the white violence and the white supremacy in our country immediately, because people are dying.
You just detail what white supremacy is, though. When we're whitewashing our history, when we're afraid to address who the perpetuators of these oppressions were because of white guilt, because we don't want to make white students feel uncomfortable or white teachers feel uncomfortable in school, damn that comfortability. Like, that's why we have the issues that we have now, where everyone feels like they can disconnect from what's happening. Like, oh, it's not me. Well, you may not have put your hand on it, but you benefit from the outcome of it, and you don't speak against it. And then when you have the opportunity to amplify those people who are around you that you so-called love, you're quiet. And honestly, none of this stuff is even going to matter, especially when it comes to education, until white teachers hold white teachers accountable. Racism ain't our problem. It's not LaTawnya's problem. It's not Naomi's problem. It's not my problem. It's your community's problem. It's going to take you guys to deal with it. I can't stop a white person from thinking or saying the things that they're saying behind closed doors, but y'all are there. Y'all hear them. And until you guys are being very intentional about a call to action for white educators across this country to get the hell off the sidelines and step their asses up and do what they got to do to help our kids feel affirmed when they can do what they got to do. So y'all don't understand, like, when our kids get suspended, they say average kid, if you get suspended at least 5 days during your entire career in school, you are 50% more likely to drop out. Every single day, these kids get suspended for bullshit. Every time we send our kids off on nonsense, like, we are setting them up for failure. And it starts with those small, just kicking them out of the class in 5th grade stuff. Then that turns into the suspending them stuff, and the expelling them stuff. And then now that kid, you know, he can't get a high school degree, and he's working some BS job, and he got to keep the lights on. So now he's selling drugs or doing crime or doing whatever to try to survive. And then now he's criminalized. Like, we set these things up from the get-go, and which is why we have to identify these biases and these racial microaggressions that happen with our kids at a young age. And it's going to take y'all.
Right. Especially being that we make, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say, like, especially being that white teachers make up about 80% of the teaching population, right? Like, so especially, like, we have the moral obligation to teach our students, especially our white students and our white staff members, the importance of our history and the oppression and injustices that are still present today. Because without us doing that on a regular basis, and not, you know, like the pop-up PDs here and there, or the pop-up conversations once, you know, every 4 months, then nothing is going to change.
I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. So yesterday I posted on Instagram because I really thought, you know what, like, out of survival, a lot of Black people have done such a phenomenal job of just making it seem like everything we've accomplished and everything we've done has just been so easy. LaTawnya went to high school. LaTawnya graduated. She went to college. She got a master's. But I'm never really telling my white friends all the little things that have been said to me, done to me, that I'm just pushing through. because I'm trying to just get the stuff done. And so we've allowed some people to be lulled into this idea that everything's fine. Because look at what you've done. All you and your siblings have gone to college. You bought a house. You've done this. You've done that. Because I'm not sitting down and sharing the details of how I felt when my professor showed me the bell curve and said, why are you trying to do any better? Because this is where you're supposed to be. But I talked to a friend of mine last night because someone DM'd me 2 posts that 2 teachers on Instagram had made about, one was, this is why I haven't posted anything about Black Lives Matter. And one had posted Black Lives Matter, and then in the same breath posted a picture of her police officer husband and said, but his life does too. And so when I'm talking to my white friend about it, because I basically said, you need to get your, I said, you need to get your girl. Like, you need to talk to her because I can't. Like, I cannot explain to her, apparently, why that's not okay. And so my friend was trying to justify, well, I think she's looking out for her husband, or, well, at least she said she's reading. And I said, I understand that. But for me, it bothers me because, like you said, most teachers are white. I said, so imagine if she's teaching Black and brown students, and we already know most teachers that are white. That means there's never going to be a time for some of those students where they even have a person that looks like them, that is telling them that you matter, that you're valued, that we got you. And then they're going to have white teachers that will never, ever say anything to speak out against just things that are happening in society. And it matters. Like, and I keep saying, like, I grew up very middle class, not in any sort of urban area, haven't even experienced the same level of discrimination that some of my relatives have. And these little things that I experienced in my very middle class upbringing, they all stick. And I said, and that builds up for students. And if there's never a teacher in their life, just for the sheer demographics of the teaching staff, that is telling students of color, we value you, we see you, just imagine what that feels like, that you're not being motivated or reassured or instilled certain thought processes about yourself while in school, you know? And so instead of trying to justify her friend, I'm telling her, you need to talk to your friend. Even though you think your friend's not going to listen, even though you think your friend's going to be mad, if you don't tell her, she's never going to learn, because she's not going to want to hear from LaTawnya, because now at this point, LaTawnya is just angry. She's sensitive. She's Black. She, you know, so I think it's very important, like Shivy said, is that we really do need you guys to do that for the people that you talk to that won't listen to us, because if not, it's never going to change in education.
We have to purge these racially insensitive educators out of the field. We have to make it uncomfortable for them to do this work. Like, I mean, that's all it comes down to, because some of this stuff can be remedied and some people are willing to make the change. And then there's some that are not. And you know the difference, right? So I'm not saying just, oh, somebody said something crazy, just let them go. I hate cancel culture. But I do believe that there are some folks that, like, we have to be very intentional about identifying who they are so that they get out of the way, because they're doing a lot of harm to our kids. And it is a malpractice on our behalf if we see it and we do not hold these people accountable. And I'm gonna tell you, you know, I have an entire note. I worked with a co-teacher last year at my school. Mind you, I'm here in Georgia, so we got a mixed bag of the type of educators we'll have, right? I've got, you know, folks who live in Dixie flag, you know, waving areas that are educating kids in my community, right? So they're saying just some of the most ridiculous things in the classroom, doing some of the most ridiculous things in the classroom. Got a whole list of things this one teacher said. I brought it to my admin, whole Black admin. I think we got one out of 7 admin. We got one white AP at my school. My school is mostly, like, everybody's Black. But I bring all these issues to them, but no action was taken. Because, see, there's a fear, especially, like, let's say you have a Black admin and you have white, you know, teachers in your school, there's a fear of white backlash. So white privilege rears its head again, and the fact that there's fear to have recourse because of their white privilege. And it's just completely toxic and ridiculous. So, like, unless it's another white teacher were to go up and say, yo, you know, what is her name? Beth is saying so-and-so and so-and-so, right? I didn't pick a stereotypical name, that's her real name. But Beth, you know, Beth said so-and-so or did so-and-so in the classroom. you know, they ain't gonna hear it from me. You know, because we're expected as Black people that if we bring something up, then we're race baiting, or we're being, you know, hypersensitive, or all the other bullshit that gets said. But these things happen, but there's little recourse, which is again why I said we need y'all to be on championing those things.
Real quick, I think the time might run out. If it does, I just want you to like just try and remember what you were saying, so that when we jump back in, like if you have time for that, you can pick up where you left off.
Will we just go back out and then hop back in the same link?
Yeah, I think so. And if not, then I'll just send another link out real quick. Like I'll send it, put it right in the chat. You know, I just want to echo what you're saying, because I think it's really important, because even as educators, as parents, we know that it is not the message, it's the messenger so often, right? That it is like some educators can push, just like some people can get kids to understand algebra better than they can understand something else. It's that messenger that's so important. And I get a lot of emails from white teachers, especially lately, from white educators that are like, well, look, I don't know how to bring this up in class. I don't know how to approach the conversation. And part of my answer is always, it is not having an answer. You don't have to have an answer for it. I'm not asking you to have to go into these conversations and be like, all right, everyone, sit down. I'm going to talk to you about this, and I'm going to teach you about how exactly to handle your feelings right now. It is creating space for students to explore and express what they're feeling, and to do something with that. And when we can teach children to do that, we can be there with them in that same space, having that conversation. Although I'm a white man, and the majority of my students are African-American males, or all males, because like I said, all boys school, but it is sharing that space, and it is creating space to really talk about stuff, and to give kids the freedom to know that your story is important. Your viewpoint, your opinion is important. You are important to me. And so I will stop the lesson. I will have the conversation. And it doesn't just stop now. This isn't something that although I think there's a lot, there's a lot to say about posting on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook right now. But what happens when in a few weeks, when this dies down, right? Just like, whether it's Michael Brown or anyone else that has, this sort of rally cry has come up around because something heinous has happened in public eye, right? Let's not forget about all the things that have happened that no one knows about, right? Like LaTawnya said, all the tons of times that something has happened that no one knows about. What are you doing 2 weeks from now? What are you doing in September? What are you doing next December? This isn't, this is like, just because right now it's a hot topic, this isn't the only time you talk about it, but how do we continue having the conversation? How do we continue working with our young people?
TJ, I think what is missed, what white America misses, is the fact that it doesn't die down for Black America. Like it is never lesser on our radar, right? When COVID-19 goes down, we're very privy to the fact that there's disproportionately more of us dying than anybody else, and why, right? We're seeing what systematic racism and oppression is doing in every single walk of our life on a daily basis, in the classroom, out the classroom, in the grocery store, in the park, selling lemonade, selling cookies, selling loose cigarettes, picking up a bag of Skittles. We're seeing these things in our life all the time. So while white America sometimes gets to fall back and be like, damn, the unemployment rate's getting high, damn, COVID-19 is spreading around, we're still having to worry about all of that, plus being a second-class citizen in this nation. So those are the things that white teachers have to be privy to. You can't just tap in when something happens and then try to call yourself an ally. This work happens every single day, whether CNN is paying attention or not. Because there's a Black kid that goes to one of your schools that's being slammed up, roughed up by these cops, feeling uncomfortable to walk in a particular neighborhood or whatever. And we're not dealing with these microaggressions until the fire gets put on top of them, or until these kids are starting to do something to people's property, and then people want to pay some damn attention. So, we have to be aware of that. And a lot of that has to do with our conversation. And we get caught kind of looking for the wrong goal. We'll talk about we need diversity in our curriculum and things like that. Man, diversity is not what we're looking for. Truly what we are looking for is inclusion. You know, you can be included and still not, you can still be there and not included. And the issue is that we're not included. Had the history or the knowledge of what Black and brown and Asian and whomever, all people do in our history, we were more included, and we wouldn't have as many of the issues or deficits in our curriculums that we have. So we really have to change what the aim is. Like, we talk about equity versus equality, right? But disregarding that there's still a barrier there. We don't want the barrier. We need to get rid of the barrier. We're seeking freedom, not equity.
And I think teachers that send you messages and say, what do I do now? I think that they also have to understand teaching is not always wrapped up in this nice little bow where you have an anticipatory set and guided practice and then independent practice and then you wrap it. Like, so some of my most rich moments or learning moments were just conversations that were unplanned, unstructured, but someone said something, someone asked something, and I just said, okay, let's pause and let's talk about it. And that's what that should just be happening all the time. It makes your teaching better. It makes the learning experience better. It takes away the stress of like, well, what book do I get? Because if you're really teaching what's going on in the world and what's happening, all of these things should just organically fall somewhere in a lesson at any given moment. So when I was teaching social studies in the history book, and somehow, I mean, we were on the topic of slavery and a student was I just asked him, like, what do you know? Just tell me what you know about slavery. It was a white student, and he was trying his hardest to tell me, and he couldn't even form his mouth to say Black people, Africa. He didn't want to say that. And so he's tap dancing around it. So I'm looking at all the other Black kids in class and we're all like, here we go. So then my conversation was just to say in that moment, and this is what we need white teachers to do, and say, time out, okay? You need to be comfortable saying Africans, Black people, whatever it is. Like, it is not bad to say Black. And so just to like say, let's talk about why you're so uncomfortable right now saying that, and let me help you out. And then I went on to say, newsflash, everybody, I'm Black. And they were just shook by the fact that I even said that, because there's been so much tiptoeing and so much, well, we don't talk about that unless it's this particular month, that it's so foreign to kids and it's so foreign to teachers because they think everything has to be cute. Everything has to have a cute font. Everything has to have such a structure. And so we have to also let go of that. Like, learning comes in conversation. Learning comes in messing up. And like I told the teacher at my school, and I think I said this in a different group, like, tell your kids you feel like I'm just a white girl from Orange County and I don't know the right words to say. And you would be surprised how open they are to you even just admitting that. I don't go into these conversations thinking that I have all the answers. I just go into the conversations because the conversations need to be had. And I never know where it's going to go. But no one's expecting you to have the right answers. I don't have the right answers. My experience as a Black person is not the same as Naomi's. It's not the same as Shivy's. So I'm just sharing my perspective, and we have to make space for that, for kids to learn, for teachers to be more comfortable doing it.
That it makes me nervous though. Like, I trust you to do that on the fly, but from a lot of the things that I see, I don't trust the majority of teachers should just jump into those conversations. They definitely need training. They definitely need some kind of like a framework to be working on. If because the teachers too are going to be tiptoeing around and not able to say the word Black or not able to say the words African American. So the teachers need training as well. And there are tons of resources out there. They're just not looking. They're messaging us, and they're not looking. They're not trying. They're not committed to this.
I get so frustrated with it because us as Black people don't even know how to identify ourselves, right? Like, there's this, like, even just amongst Black folk, right? Like, so behind, when y'all ain't around, we having conversations talking about, well, how do we identify ourselves? You know, the whole listen, the term African American was an invention by Jesse Jackson in the 80s. And to be real with you, like, call us Black, okay? Because my mother is from Guyana, South America. You know, I'm a first generation American, right? My mother is a Black woman here in America, but she's not African American, right? If I'm Haitian and I live in America, I'm not an African American. If I'm Jamaican in America, I'm not an African American. And so when we say African American, like, we are dividing Black people into further sectors, which we cannot afford to be any further divided. I am as Black as my brother in Haiti or Liberia or Guam, right? And we need to be unified and intentional about that, like, because all of your Black students are not African American. And so, like, people being afraid to just say Black is like some BS. And on the flip side, even using the term Caucasian is perpetuating white supremacy. You don't use the term Caucasian. It's white. Like, you don't do it. You're not referring to me as an Ethiopian, because that was the term used for Black people to describe Black people at the same time that the term Caucasian was created, right? So those terms are archaic. Like, don't use it. We're Black, we're white, we're Asian, we're whatever, right? And we have to be clear about that. And even Black folks, when we have conversations about reparations and stuff like that, right? I know it's a little off the topic, but just to be clear, like, you can't talk about reparations if we are not a nation. Only nations get reparations. That's why certain individuals got reparations and we haven't, right? So certain things have to happen. You have to be under a flag. You have to be under a constitution. Like, legally, certain things have to happen in order to get that. So we have to understand what the roles are. But lastly, the things that we're talking about are systematic. And in order to find solutions to it, we have to talk about systematic solutions. Because we can get mad about the little BS that happens with, whoever down the hall who is insensitive or did something or said something, but we'll be sitting there playing whack-a-mole forever with racism if we deal with every single little BS thing that happens. We need systematic recourse and change of direction in what we're doing. If we want to talk about why our schools are disproportionately funded, or why one side of town is doing better than the other, and we're talking about property taxes, right? So if we want more of a level playing field, then you got to have a real conversation nationwide about pulling the relationship between local property taxes and local schools and turn that into a system where all schools across a state are funded at the same level, whether they're rural or urban, whether they're in a high per capita income area or a low per capita income area. Until we have those type of conversations, we ain't talk about nothing, okay? Because the way we're set up, you can concentrate home ownership wealth in particular areas and keep a system, a cycle of high dollars in that area, and then keep down other areas because you're concentrating the wealth. And until you get rid of that, we ain't talking about nothing. So we have to be clear about what's really going to cause the changes. And I guarantee you, if we ever had a real conversation about things like that in the nation, there would be uproar. Why? Because it would work, because it would change things.
And it would discomfort the white population.
Hell yeah.
I mean, you think about, like, here in Indianapolis, the north side of Indianapolis, we have 3 school districts. 2 of my nephews go to these schools. And I mean, like, I couldn't imagine my students being able to experience the things that my nephews are experiencing on the north side of Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that would be available to everybody, regardless of the location, regardless of the income or the status, it would discomfort, and that's where the uproar would come from. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's what's needed.
Those educators that don't want to work in some of those other schools, like in the areas that you serve, because it ain't as shiny, right? They would now have to look at things completely differently. Those Black folks that go up and get their education and do better, and they because this happens. We have a brain drain in our community where we do better, we earn some money, we move out of our neighborhoods, we sell grandma's house, right? It gets bought by somebody else, and then we have gentrification. And then on the other end, we done moved out, and now we're building up and putting our dollars into someone else's community. We lose Black dollar circulation that way. We lose the opportunity to really build up our neighborhoods that way. I tell my kids all the time, listen, when you guys go to college, when you get that good job, don't move out the hood, y'all. Build the hood. Like, don't leave our communities, feed our communities. And that's like really where our mindset has to be, because we keep leaving and abandoning our neighborhoods and then wondering why they never get better. Or get mad when they get gentrified.
Such a good point there too.
One last staff meeting I have to go to, so I've got to jump out and
100%.
my Zoom staff meeting, but appreciate all of you. Love it. Can't wait to watch the final conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. So I think part of that, Shivy, is like creating access for students to know what's better. So like there's a, I won't name them here because I have a partnership with them and I'm trying to do some stuff with that partnership. But there's a school in the suburbs of Philadelphia that my students and I went to one time to do like a collaboration with them as like their students and my students together. And we walk in and it is like, it's like what you would dream a school would look like. Mm-hmm. Like access to technology was, no kidding, an entire wall in the hallway where you could grab a laptop, an iPad, cameras, everything was available. You didn't sign it out. You just went and took what you needed and then used it. This school, the hallways were, it looked like Starbucks. There were like all these little spots all over the place where students would just collaborate. So we're in a classroom and the teacher says, all right, everyone, come up here, grab your supplies, and then go find a space to work, come back in 25 minutes. Everyone sets their watch. And my guys that are with me are just looking at me like, yo, like, did we just leave the room? And I'm thinking, I don't know. I never heard of this either. Like, I didn't even know this was a thing that existed. And, you know, the sad part of that is that I didn't go to that school and think, man, like, why do you guys have this and we don't? It's that, or no, not, I said that wrong. I wasn't mad that those students got to go to that school. What upset me was that all children don't get to go to this school. Right. And so I think sometimes those of us in education also, we get so good at making something from nothing. We get so good at knowing to hide copy paper, which I do every year on my desk because you know that stuff's going to run out at some point and then you don't have any, at hiding your expo markers so that other teachers aren't ruining them or losing them because you know they're like the street value on a expo marker is so high. But it is putting yourself in a position to know that there's better and then shooting for it, because I don't even think my students would know what to ask for. And so it is, when you see it, you can be it kind of an idea. It's providing access for our students to meet with people, to go places, to do things that are going to broaden their worldview and then let them know this is what actually exists. And for educators too, because, you know, I think part of that white savior complex that we see so often in white educators comes from, no, I don't want that stuff. I want to be put in like some dirty room with the worst kids and like no materials and then watch what I do. And it's like, no, I want all the stuff. Like I want access to all of it. So then you can help, you know, your students, you know, pave their own way and have a say in their own education and actually do, like, for my kids to look at me to be like, can we leave the room? It's like, yeah, like, but we run schools like prisons, right? It's like, ask me when you want to go to the bathroom. I'm going to tell you when you can speak. I'm going to tell you speak when spoken to, and then you're never spoken to, right? And it's that mindset that, like, it's this larger systematic thing, back to what you were saying as well.
No, that's a fact.
I think it does. Oh, sorry.
No,
I
go
think
ahead.
it does perpetuate a lot of the systems that are holding things back or holding things in the place where they're at now that can't be changed. And I know it's somewhat off, but like last summer, when I took that trip to Finland, and we all know people are always talking about performance there, that is exactly how their school system is set up. Their schools are not funded based on tax dollars or anything like that. And so there were so many things that they were telling us that we were just baffled by. And so one of the leaders of education, first of all, the people that make policy are actually educators, which is quite the concept. And
teachers don't run for school boards at the rate that we should. And if you live in the neighborhood you serve, you cannot serve on that board. That becomes an issue as well.
Yeah. And so one of the teachers and even a parent said, we don't have a fear of where to send our kids to school because all the schools are funded exactly the same way. And the education is designed to expose them, like, here are your opportunities, here are some paths you could take. And they are just given there is no state testing because that's just not even seen as something that's necessary. And I came back and said to my district leaders, like, hey, they're organizing a trip that is now specifically geared towards administrators so you can see their systems in place and why things are working. And they have like no interest in going to see it. They like to talk about it. They like to like hypothesize why they're having such success in that country. But then when I'm telling you, this is why, they're like, oh, well, you know, But it was just so, I almost, like, there was a part of me that thought, I'm about to pack my bags and I'm about to move to Finland, because just on the idea that all schools are funded. So I don't have to worry that I live in this neighborhood, because like you said, my parents are a prime example. The amount of times we moved in my general area just to get me to the school that they thought the resources were going to be at. Like, by the time I was in high school, I can't even tell you how many schools I went. And it was like, oh, you're about to start high school, it's time to move. You know, because not all schools are funded the same way,
No,
which means
not.
not all kids have the same opportunities.
It will change again.
Cut out right now, but thank you for
Are you leaving?
the conversation. Yes, my son's awake now, but I look forward to listening to the rest of it too.
Got it. Bye-bye, Naomi.
Bye.
So
when I first bought my house in 2011, we were zoned to one school, one particular school that was not like a favorable school you wanted to be. It was like South Atlanta High School or whatever. Because I worked at the Capitol here, as a legislative aide for a few years before I was teaching. And, you know, because I had ties to certain politicians, I was able to get my house rezoned. Just getting my house rezoned increased the value of my home $200,000. Like, that's how insane this schooling is. And that's what it does to our real estate as well. You know, we would actually, you want to talk about having a massive uprising in Black home ownership wealth, fund their schools and watch what that will do to Black home ownership wealth. You want to talk about like having massive upward mobility, change how we fund our schools. Black folks' houses and neighborhoods would be much more desirable if our schools were better funded. So like, these are the type, again, why I talk about like systematic changes, like on its face, like, and again, like them APs and admin, they can't do nothing about that. That's a state legislature issue. That's a state constitutional issue. That's not something that admin can do anything about. It's like above them.
I have a tendency to talk a lot, so that's why I'm like creating space.
Same. You're good.
I do know Naomi has a little one too, and so that was her nap time, which I was saying to her before the call. Like, I just remember what that was like. You know, when your kid takes a nap, you are like, oh, this is like, no one move, don't make any noise. This is your time in the middle of the day. I just think that's so important. Shivy, that idea of like, this has to come from a higher level, right? It has to be created top down to really make that change. But I think that I don't want people to mishear that and think, you know, like LaTawnya was saying, it shouldn't just stop when, you know, like, we can't just say like, well, I have scripted lesson plans, or it doesn't really fit into what I'm doing. It's making space. It's not being run. You're not being run by policy. I'm not a slave to policy or to curriculum. It is, if I was in school the day after the George Floyd murder, I would have said, we need to just make space for the day and have this conversation. And although that might be uncomfortable, although people might not want to do it, and look, maybe your students don't even all jump on it. It's not even putting this on your kids. It's creating space to make that happen and letting that be the norm. So, you know, we've lost any number of young people over the years in my school to gun violence or something else. And every time that happens, the conversation is, how do we talk about this? I don't know if I should bring this up in class. I don't know if it's my place. Of course it is. You are an educator. You are a person that is trusted with young people to just open it up and say, I don't know what to do. Like, so like if someone was shot, and I've never been there, right? I didn't grow up in a neighborhood like that. I grew up in a neighborhood that looked like Leave It to Beaver, man, to be for real. Like, we didn't lock our doors. I didn't have to put my bike away. Like, that's where I grew up. But it is me saying that it is my attention over my advice, because I'm not going to fix anyone anyway. I'm not going to make anyone feel better anyway. You lost your friend. It's creating space to let young people know that they have a voice and that they can share that. And if we do that, we build trust, we build relationships as human beings, and then we're moving forward from there. And I think that there's just a lot to say about just creating that open space for kids.
And I think like that, if there's one accessible thing that someone could watch and then take that back to the classroom, I really do think that that's it, because there are a lot of systematic changes that need to occur that are, much bigger because it involves heavy politics. But I think what I learned in just my first year teaching middle school, because I taught elementary school, and elementary kids are going to love you and they're going to listen and they're going to try, because that's still a part of who they are for the most part in school. But there were times where I made those spaces for middle schoolers and not very many people talked. But what I learned by the end of the year, it was just the fact that they knew that there was a space to do it that was important to them, because there's, so many of them said things to me, in a note or a private conversation, where they just appreciated the fact that if they wanted to say something, there was a time and a place where they were allowed to say something, or maybe they were exposed to something that a teacher never shared before. And it doesn't always even have to be related directly to their culture, their lives. Like when we talked about Native American History Month and talked about blood quantum, like just for them to be like mind blown about that. So I think for teachers, anyone that's listening to this saying, okay, I can't change property taxes and I'm looking for something to do in the class, just make the opportunity. And even if you only have one student speak, all the students saw and heard that the opportunity was made, and now know opportunities are created here for me to say my piece, for me to be seen, for me to be heard. And I truly, truly believe that, like CJ said, that is the connection that is made. And you can't affect students the same way if they feel no connection to you. And there have been times where I'm sure each of us, whether you're white or not, there have been times where things have come out of my mouth in the classroom where I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I made myself uncomfortable, but it had to be said, like it had to be said. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look, we're at an hour. So I think unless you have something else that you're like, that's really like, you just kind of want to get out. I was going to call it there. And then, if we wanted to do this again, I'm more than happy to do it like, on any platform in any particular way that people find it valuable. But is there anything else, just because I'm also like, this recording thing is going, but I'm just like, when does this end? Like, I can't see a timer. Is there anything that someone had to just, that they wanted to say before closing out?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say, at all levels in education, that representation has to be at the forefront of all that we do all year, day in and day out. That there's no excuse for avoiding conversations about race and injustice. Like there's no excuse for it. Whether you teach elementary, middle, or high school, I teach elementary, and the depth of the conversations that I've had with 9 and 10-year-old kids, it proves that you can have that conversation and those deep conversations at any point in time. And, I'm watching my 11, 12, 13-year-old kids make these TikToks right now that are saying, like, Black Lives Matter. And so I'm like, my white students are making these. So it's like those conversations, especially with my white students who are seeing their black and brown friends, like what they're dealing with right now, and that they can have the mindsets, that just gives me hope for the future. Like those conversations, and it's getting me like, because it sucks and it's not easy. But it's something that's got to happen. I didn't have that. I grew up in an all-white town. I had no diversity whatsoever. I had no exposure to the outside world. We're the gatekeepers of information. So we are locking that gate from information to our students. Then where are they getting that information? Because if I'm in 4th grade and K3, we're locking that gate as well. Then who's going to be the person that opens the gates to the conversations that need to happen? And at that point in time, had they had too many experiences throughout their lives that they can't change those biases until they're my age, 33 years old, and they're realizing all the crap that they had privilege for 33 years. And so I just feel like it's imperative that we have those conversations from a young age and not wait until they get to Shivy to have these conversations for you.
All right.
Anyone else?
And I think, sorry.
I just want to say thank you all for being courageous enough to really kind of hit it head on, have the conversation, get it started. I mean, this is how we start things. Everything I said in terms of, in terms of, encouraging white educators to walk into anti-racist work is going to require white educators to do it. Like we could start off encouraging you guys. We can do our parts in terms of amplifying or sharing those of you who are doing the good work. But it's really, it's a call for you guys, and you guys have a responsibility to call on your peers, from your community to really tap in. We don't have a choice. Nobody luxury of sitting on the sidelines anymore. We can't sit by and passively watch occasions of like white privilege rear their head and not acknowledge them. We can't. You can't enjoy the benefits of white privilege and not acknowledge them anymore. Like, those days of just kind of not addressing things because we have the privilege not to are gone. So if we're really about that life, really about that change, then we really have to be intentional about bringing in more allies and more colleagues to do the work too.
And I would just say, just remember that if you are choosing not to have certain conversations because it makes you uncomfortable, you're doing so at the detriment of your students, which ultimately is to the detriment of society as a whole, because we have an impact whether you realize it or not. And I think we need to take this time. I know I'm taking this time because I need to be a better history teacher, and I will teach next year history and social studies with more of a activist civic engagement mindset, because I need them to understand what power they have at the age they're at now, at the age they will be as adults. And I think that that's what all teachers need to remember, that you teach them math, reading, and all that, but also teach them what it means to be a citizen of the place they live in, and what it means to stand up for things that are right and speak out against things that are wrong. So we do impact the future, whether we think about that on a day-to-day basis or not.
100%. Gang, thanks so much. I really had to think long and hard about who about this conversation, and this, even getting ready for this, just made me do some deep diving and some real thinking, and I really thank you for even being willing to come on and do this, because it's more than, and not to diminish anyone's good work, but it's more than a tweet or an Instagram post. It is sitting down and having the conversation, and being recorded, and then having your stuff uploaded onto the internet, which is difficult, especially when it's you're not really sure what you're going to get. And you all, I don't know if everyone knew everyone either. I know I knew everyone, but I didn't know if you all knew each other either. So thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I really, really appreciate it.
I apologize if I caused you extra editing because of some of my foul language today, but
we keep it real. That's why it's called Real Rap with Reynolds and not, fake shit with Reynolds. So
It is what it is today. It's a tough time in our community. I think a lot of us are just honestly fed up, man. We've been talking and talking and talking. I was just thinking, I was telling my son yesterday, I'm like, bro, these same streets these kids are marching on right now, I was marching on in '94 with my dad, after Rodney King and things like that. You know what I'm saying? We've been doing this. And a lot of us are frustrated, and it's hard to tell these young people how to respond to this when they've seen us try everything and not get the results that we're looking for. When we've seen police officers get arrested, maybe charges come up, but then not get convicted. There's little faith in the system right now, and so folks right now are they're hurting, man, and that's what we're seeing everywhere.
Yeah. Thank you. And that was it. We were sort of held to the time that Zoom allowed us. I'm not exactly sure what I was shooting for here, except, like I said, to use this social platform to have a long-range conversation about some of these things. I don't know that there are any necessarily definitive answers that could come out of a conversation that is this short, but I think what it does is it opens up space and it models what these conversations can look like and should look like. And so if you're having these conversations with someone and you feel apprehensive, it's about being vulnerable. It's about making space for it to happen. And so I want to thank all of my friends that came on here. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, and I really appreciate you being honest and vulnerable and sharing your passion with everyone. I encourage everyone watching this to go below and find all of these folks. I'll leave links to all of their different socials in the description box below, so you can just go on and click on and follow them. And that's it. I'm gonna let the conversation speak for itself. Peace.